right, well, welcome everybody. My name is Adam Ingrao. I'm with Michigan Food and Farming Systems, and I'm also the co-owner of Be Wise Farms. Today we're going to be talking about agritourism, so having folks out on your farm to do fun stuff. Anybody already exploring agritourism? All right, so we're going to talk about all the great things and like potential risks that you're putting yourself involved in with having folks on your farm today. So I'll start with just a little bit about myself and my partner's operation. So we're a 40-acre diversified farm in the Upper Peninsula. We're in Newberry, just south of Tequamanon Falls. The main things that we do on the farm, our main thing is bees. We're the largest producer of local bees in the Upper Peninsula. We sell a lot of bees every year, all produced in the UP. And then we also produce lavender, asparagus, and a whole bunch of other kind of value-added products that we do with kind of our lavender, honey products, bee products, things like that. About 5 years ago, we started thinking about how can we get more folks out to the farm, and really kind of trying to break that barrier that a lot of farmers see with wholesaling. So you put all this effort into your products, growing these crops, and then you turn around and wholesale them to a middleman that's going to basically make money off of your work. And although that model works for a lot of folks, especially when you're dealing with huge acreage, when you're dealing with small acreage and you're really an intense farmer, all of that work that you put into your products really could come right back to you as a retail sale. And that's really what we saw an opportunity with agritourism. And we first started with workshops. Just offering workshops. People come out and learn with us. Then we opened a retail store, and that was great because now we are the retail store. That wholesale price is non-existent. We are gaining retail sales from everything we produce. We started doing camping, and we also do special events as well. I'm going to talk about the details about all of that, but this is just a little bit about what we do on our farm, and it has really worked for us. Moving from a wholesale model where we were selling things, our honey was going to somebody else and then they were marking it up, that was fine for a while, but it really has changed things for us, being able to be the individual who produces and is direct to consumer. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of all of this. Let's first talk about what is agritourism. So agritourism is a form of commercial enterprise that links agricultural production and or processing with tourism to attract visitors onto the farm, the ranch, or other agricultural businesses for the purposes of entertaining or educating the visitors while generating income for the farm, ranch, or farm business. And that's the big thing, this is an income stream that you're developing by having people out onto your farm. Most folks, don't have people come out to their farms. One, because there's a lot of risks involved with it. But if you think about this in a logical manner and set yourself up with the proper protections, this can be a very lucrative part of a small farm enterprise. And we have a 40-acre farm now, but this all started in Lansing on a 2-acre urban farm. So this can be scaled at any size. And that picture right there, that was no more than 2 miles from the Lansing Capitol, where we had 70 people come to our farm on a 2-acre farm and do a full beekeeping workshop all day. And that is a really great avenue for income. So let's talk about how agritourism can impact your business. One of the big things that it does is it increases customer traffic. So now you're not just trying to find an outlet to sell your goods, you're inviting the public onto your farm to experience the farm. And most of the time when someone comes to the farm, they want to engage, they want to solicit you, they want to buy your products. Nobody ever leaves my farm without wanting to buy some honey. And so you have a natural pathway to be able to sell goods. Higher profit margins, and I've already talked about that. You go from selling to wholesalers to being the retailer. And now that profit margin that you were constantly trying to work with to make things work with you at a wholesale level is kind of out the door because now you're gaining those retail prices. And I'll use us as an example. This is our farm store. Nothing super huge, a 10 by 20 building, prefab building that we have with all of our goods in it. But that goes from me being able to sell honey for $8 a pound to being able to sell honey for $15 a pound. And that is all coming to me now instead of us just be able to find a good price for our wholesalers to be attracted to. Customer loyalty also really builds in when you're having people on the farm. It's like they get buy-in on the farm. You have people that you interact with at the farmers market probably all the time if you're doing farmers markets. They love your story, they love meeting you every week, they love buying your produce, but when they come to your farm, it's a totally different experience. It's almost like they have buy-in in your enterprise because they kind of start taking on these like roles of, wow, you know, I weeded that lavender patch, and you know, they have a little bit of ownership over what the enterprise is at that point. They're much more bought in, and so the customer loyalty skyrockets. Now people go from like, you know, they might buy honey from me once a year to now we're the only people they buy honey from because they're out on the farm. They see how it's produced. They know how much we care about our animals. And that's a big thing, is they're seeing your passion as they're on your farm. However, with all of these pluses, there are a huge amount of downsides to having people on your farm. Farms are dangerous places. Equipment's moving around, you have animals that don't always act right, you know, sometimes that hog gets a little spicy. These things are things you have to consider when you have the public on your farm because things can happen. And if they happen in a bad way, that can affect your entire livelihood. It can go from you owning a farm and trying to make things work to you not owning anything because now you've lost it all because of some lawsuit because you were found to be negligent for having that hog roaming around on the farm when it should have been in a pen. Insurance needs are going to change dramatically. So having the public on your farm is going to require a different type of insurance policy. And not all carriers provide policies that are dealing with agritourism. We searched for months trying to find, I mean, we went from AAA was our insurance when we first started. They didn't want to touch us with a 10-foot pole. Liberty Mutual, nope, didn't want to touch us either. Farm Bureau was the only insurance policy that we could find that would blanket everything under an insurance policy that covered us both from the agricultural standpoint and all of the things that we have that go into building and making a farm work, but also the liability related to having people on your farm. And it's really important that you have that. It also provides increased customer scrutiny. So whatever agricultural practices you're following, the public is going to see all of it. And so sometimes folks don't agree with the practices that you're employing. No matter how much of a steward you are of the land, oftentimes people have differing opinions about how things can be done. And being a beekeeper, I will tell you, the bane of my existence is YouTube. Because the stuff that gets put out on YouTube, a lot of the time is garbage in the beekeeping industry. And there's all these like fanciful ideas about what farming is on YouTube. And it doesn't always align with what actual agriculture is. You know, we can all make some beautiful video on TikTok, but does that actually equate to what agricultural management looks like on your farm? And so you have to understand that inviting people out is going to increase a level of scrutiny on your practices. Now, we all are, you know, as farmers, we're all stewards of the earth, and we're a meat verified farm, so we've gone through all of the meat verification, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in just a bit, to make sure that we're doing everything in an a good environmental stewards of our land. But again, you know, you're going to have people with lots of different opinions that may be coming out to your farm. No problem. What are some of the popular activities that we see on farms that invite folks out? Well, one of the big ones, and probably one of the easiest ones for anybody to break into, is educational workshops. You all are probably experts in a certain area of your agricultural field, and you want to share that knowledge with the community. Now, these can be fee-based workshops, which we provide fee-based workshops for folks, or they can be free. If you want to give back to your community, empower the people that you are working with, give them free education. We provide beekeeping education for military veterans. I'm an Army veteran myself, and we run the largest beekeeping education program in the United States for military service members through Michigan Food and Farming Systems. We have 4,200 people in this program this year alone. And so it's a huge program, but veterans come out every single month with us and participate in free activities, basically learning how to become good beekeepers. We also offer a whole host of other workshops that are focused on therapy and agriculture. My partner is a transpersonal psychologist that focuses on nature-based therapy, and so we have folks all the time out on the farm just to do walks of gratitude on the farm, just to be able to have sensory experiences on the farm. And we do a lot of work with Agribility, who is here today as well, that works with individuals with disabilities. I'm a disabled vet. I have a traumatic brain injury. I've lost almost all the hearing in my right ear. I also suffer from, I have fusion. I've had fusion on my neck. I have ankle injury, knee injury. So I'm always dealing with a lot of like lifting things are really tough, and as a beekeeper, anybody's ever kept bees, like lifting is like basically what you do for a living. Those things are tough, and so we bring folks out to teach them how to deal with their disabilities. How can we work safely to ensure we're not causing secondary injury? The retail store is huge. Having a retail storefront, again, it opens up that retail market to you entirely. Now, the big thing about retail stores is not all of our farms are in places where you're going to draw a lot of people to it. Like some of us live in pretty remote areas. I live in the UP, but I'm right on M28 in Newberry. So we are on the main thoroughfare that goes east to west through the UP. So everybody that comes up to visit Tequamanon Falls passes our farm. So sometimes when you're thinking about retail stores, a lot of times what you need to be thinking about is like, where is the location that's going to make that happen? And I grew up working in California on agritourism farms. So I knew we wanted to be on a main highway because that's what every farm I'd ever worked on had been on, to have a retail store. So something to consider. Experiences. This is a picture of one of our beekeeping experiences where folks can pay us to come out and just basically spend an hour with me in the bee yard. We put them in bee suits. These people have never touched bees in their entire life. They just want an experience. And for those experiences, we charge $90 an hour. And all season long, those experiences are filled up because people just want to have the experience of working on a farm. And these are oftentimes, because we live in a tourism area, these are tourists that are coming through that are like, hey, I want to do something fun today. Let's go play with the bees. Processing services. So this is a picture of one of our friends here who's using our processing services. Many of you who are growing vegetables, who have all the food safety things in place and have done all the work to get a processing facility that's up to MDARD standards and USDA standards, that is a valuable asset that you have. And lots of other farmers could take advantage of that valuable asset that you have. Whether that's something that you provide for free or charge services to access your processing facilities that you've spent all this money to build, that is oftentimes a really great revenue generator, because when it comes to beekeeping, most folks that start beekeeping don't have the equipment to extract their honey. And so we provide them with that. Weddings, huge. Weddings, senior pictures. You have a beautiful farm. Folks want to be on it. Weddings are really nice to host. Senior pictures, we do a lot of those. And we're in a very small community, so everybody kind of knows us. They want to come out and take some pictures with the flowers. We grow bearded irises. When those are in bloom in June, we get a lot of folks that want to come out and take pictures with those. So that's something you can do as well. You pick corn mazes and harvest festivals. These are all kind of things that we're used to in Michigan, right? So, I mean, these big agricultural enterprises that are doing corn mazes, like Uncle John's Cider Mill and all these places, those are huge agritourism businesses. And we all know, if you've been to those places during the season, how busy those places are. Like the revenue that's coming in from having a public-facing and public interacting piece of your business, that makes all the difference for a lot of these operations. And where I grew up on working on apple farms mainly. It was the same thing, like cider, donuts. My gosh, like how many hundreds of thousands of dollars are you pulling in from this ability to bring people onto your farm? They want to patronize you. They're there to buy things. When they come to your farm and it's someplace that's a public destination, they're not there just to hang out. They're there to buy something. So really great opportunities for all these activities. Now, when you're hosting visitors, you also have to think about all the other things that come along with having the public out there. Like, what are the things you have to provide as a business owner to even make it appropriate for someone to come out? Number one is parking. If you're going to open an agritourism site, if you're having people out to your farm, and say you live in Ann Arbor, and there are 100,000 people that want to come visit your farm, you better darn make sure that you have the parking to accommodate that. Because when you open up the doors, and there's a line out on the street to get into your place, that's a mess to deal with. So you have to understand, like, what scale do I want to be at, and what can I accommodate with the land that I have, and parking is a big one. Restrooms and hand washing stations. This is like one of the things that a lot of people don't even think about. But if someone's out to your farm, you don't give them a restroom, they're going to find some place to do their business. So you have to provide people with facilities. And you need to make sure that these facilities are accessible, because you never know who's going to show up, and you want this place to be inviting for everybody. And so ADA accessible restrooms, porta-johns are fine. We bring out an ADA accessible porta-john every year to the farm. It's about $350 a month during the season. It's a major expense, But I would much rather have that expense than have somebody show up at my farm and me not be able to accommodate them with the needs that they have. And it's a really important thing to think about. Maps, signage, and restricted areas. Oftentimes you don't want people all over your farm. There's areas you want them to be in, but then there's also areas they don't need to be in, which is like where you store your tractor and your implements and your pesticides. All of those things are hazardous, and you do not want people around those things. So what we did after the first year of having people out is develop a map that everybody gets that has, we have a mile-long walking trail all the way around the farm. They're welcome to stay on that. There's signage on the trail, but there's areas where they know they're not supposed to be. Now, just because you tell them not to go there, that doesn't always mean everything. And so you have to be, please come on in. You don't need to hide. So something to think about. But these restricted areas, oftentimes, it's not, and they can be, permanent restricted areas, like maybe a production field, where you don't want foot traffic in there because you don't know what people are bringing on their boots. Fusarium is a prime example of a soil-borne pathogen that comes in on tires, it comes in on feet, and if you have a production field that you are, sensitive about your biosecurity, you want to make sure that people know they're not supposed to go there. Wi-Fi. I mean, we live in a digital age. If you have people out to your farm, a lot of people are going to ask about Wi-Fi. We get that question all the time. People spending a couple hours on the farm, invariably someone's going to ask about Wi-Fi. Play areas. Play areas are great things to offer, especially because you're going to have customers that are going to come out with kids, and you want them to have a place to be able to engage. And we'll talk about things to think about when it comes to play areas here in just a moment. Water access, another thing, it's the season, it's going to be hot some days, having water for folks, or at least some access, or even if it's water for sale, but making sure that there's water available. This comes into play when you're dealing with campers. So we're in the UP. There are people in these ginormous RVs and all of these huge pieces of equipment. We're on a 2-lane highway. When people are traveling east, we're on the north side of the highway. When people are traveling east past us, if they are more than about 35 feet, they cannot turn into our driveway or our parking lot. It's not physically possible because of the area of the road. We learned this very quickly when someone came in with a 55-foot truck and trailer and literally blocked all of M28 trying to get into our store. So you have to understand, and this is something that we just put on our website. We can't accommodate vehicles higher than that. This is someone's phone up here. This is not my phone, but they must be looking for it. Francie, can I give that to you? Yeah. Like, where is my phone? Okay. So restrictions on vehicle size. Just know what your place can handle, and that might be a trial and error type of thing, but just know what your place can handle. Animals. This is our dog with our ducks. Your animals might be used to your animals. Like your dogs might be fine with your ducks. We had an individual who brought out an animal. It was the first year we were doing this. And she was like, oh, my dog is great. He lives on a farm. He's great with chickens and ducks. Not more than a half hour after that, he was on one of our ducks. And so you need to protect your livestock, right? And so having some sort of a policy around animals is something to think about, because people that are traveling are invariably going to be bringing their animals with them. Someone's going to have a dog, and we're dog people. I like dogs, but not all dogs like ducks or chickens or things like that. Weather and soil types. So it's something you need to be thinking about. And what I mean by this is that, so we live on a sand hill in the UP, so drainage is fine. But down about 20 miles from us is pure clay. And this time of the season, if you get a car that drives into your driveway, it may not get out. And you may be getting the tractor to pull that vehicle out. So know what your soil types can handle. If you have a driveway that's muddy, you may need to get gravel put in there if you're going to be bringing people out there, because the last thing you want to be doing is pulling people out with a tractor. Overnight guests. So one of the big things that we've noticed with overnight guests is that not always does my management practices align with people's vacation schedules. So I might be harvesting animals that day, and somebody really may not like to see what it is really like to harvest chickens. That might be something that's traumatic for folks. Granted, it's a farm and you're coming to a farm, but I may have to adjust my harvesting schedule based on who's at my farm. Spraying, whether you are organic practices, whatever you are spraying, if it comes out of a spray nozzle, people immediately associate that with the worst thing possible. And it oftentimes takes education, and spraying, as generally good spraying practices, you're going to do it in the morning or in the evening when wind speeds are low and things like that. But if people see that happening, lots of questions come up. If you're walking around with a backpack sprayer full of neem oil, they're going to think it's like you're basically throwing toxins all over the earth, when in actuality, you're using an organic product that breaks down very quickly. So something like that. Guests that are overnight, you're going to be dealing with alcohol consumption, potentially marijuana, we live in a legal state, and smoking. You just need to come up with policies around this type of stuff. If you're a 420 friendly facility, put it on your map. We have it on our map that, yeah, we're a 420 friendly facility. We do not want alcohol consumption, in the main areas of the farm, but if you're in your camper, I'm fine with that. Fires are another thing, so fire rings, come on in. No problem. We're all here to learn. So fire rings are another thing. Now, potential risk around that, dry seasons, you got to make sure people know when you cannot be burning, right? So when there is no burning allowed, you need to make sure that your guests know that. You can offer trails. We have about a mile-long trail that we've created. Make sure there's no tripping hazards on that trail. So stumps, things like that. You can provide gift baskets to your overnight guests. That really kind of hits home for a lot of folks. They get a bottle of honey and a little something from you. But you can also offer things like sleeping quarters. So Airbnb is a prime example. And I know lots of farmers that have little, we'll call them quarters, that are, they're rustic. But it gets people out on the farm. It gets them experiencing the farm in a different way. People love that kind of stuff. This is our little building right here that has both our processing facility and a little bedroom in it. And they're literally looking over our lavender field. So when it's in full bloom, people are sitting there in bed looking over the lavender field. It's a great experience. So sleeping quarters are things you can provide. Rustic camping, we do that as well. So just a plot that's cleared and has a fire ring. Lots of people like to do that. Glamping is something a lot of people have really gotten into, really fancy tents and all this kind of stuff. We have not done that, but there is a premium for these sites. If you look at like Airbnb and some of these other camping sites, when you put a nice tent up with a queen bed in it and all these like pretty little things, you can charge a premium for those things. So these are some of the camping services and organizations that we work with. I didn't put Airbnb on here because that's just kind of a given. I mean, Airbnb kind of does everything. But the ones that we have used, and I'll give you the kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly of these three. So Hip Camp is one where they pay you directly. So you get paid for them to come out and camping on your site. Boondockers, they pay the subscription to be part of Boondockers, and you get nothing. They just come out and stay on your farm for free. Harvest Host, which just recently purchased Boondockers, they purchase a subscription from Harvest Host, and the deal is they're supposed to patronize your business. Now, let me tell you how that goes. Some people spend $2 in our store just to basically say they did it. They're supposed to do $20. That's what Harvest Host tells them. Is $20 is what you should be giving to these farmers to let them stay on your property. That does not always happen. Sometimes we get somebody that spends $200, but a lot of times you get somebody that we get lots of folks that don't buy anything. And they feel like they've already paid Harvest Host, and a lot of them feel like we're getting paid from Harvest Host, which is not the case. So just understanding which one of these works for you. Yes?
So are they just ripping people off? Like what's
the attraction? So Harvest Host is kind of interesting.
If they can come camp with you anyway, what are they paying for? What are they paying them for?
Well, because when they purchase a subscription to Harvest Host, they can stay at over 3,000 sites for free across the United States.
Okay, even if
that includes golf courses, museums, big like wineries and things like that. For bigger businesses, like if I owned a 500-acre winery with a tasting room and had a huge parking lot where anybody could pull an RV in, that's no sweat off me. They can just park in the parking lot. For a smaller farm, it's much more interactive because they're literally 400 feet from my house. They're walking around in my production fields. They're in my farm space. So it's a little different when you're a smaller farmer. It's attractive for some of the bigger businesses because they feel like they're just generating people coming in. But for the smaller farmers, it may not work as well. So it's just something to keep in mind. But these services, you do get a lot of exposure from them, and that's the big thing. But if that exposure does not equal money coming into your business, is it really worth the risk? Is I guess what I would be saying. For us, we've done all of these. The only one that we do anymore is Hip Camp, because it's the only one we have control over. It's the only one we have consistent revenue from. This is a crapshoot to know if I'm going to get a customer that's going to buy anything from us. So it's just something to consider as you're getting into this space. Yes, sir.
What kind of profits do you get like off a hip camp, like for like a pop-up camper?
So it ranges. You set the price. So for our site, we have just a bare site. It's got a fire ring. It's $55 a night. And you'd be surprised how many people suck that up. And it's nice because, like, in our situation, there's one campsite on our property for hip campers. And so you have basically the whole place to yourself, you know, instead of being in a campground where you've got people right next to you. So it's attractive for a lot of folks. Mm-hmm.
May I ask, what do you do for restrooms for these campsites?
Yeah, that's why we have the portable toilets. So the ADA accessible toilet is right next to the campsite. Yep. We do not provide showers or anything like that. Yes?
So I'm in the process of building my own little outhouse for my campsite.
Yeah.
What does it have to have to be ADA accessible?
So 32-inch doors, the ability to be able to turn a wheelchair entirely around. There are specific dimensions that you can look up online for ADA accessible toilets. Okay, so marketing practices. So you've decided you want to do this. Maybe you decided you don't want to sign up with one of those services. You want to try to do this on your own. What are some of the ways that you can get your farm out there as a destination? Well, obviously online promotion, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all those things. Yeah, you can get a lot of things from that. Tabled events. We find that the events that we table in our community, because we have a lot of tourism in the Upper Peninsula, most of the time, that's where we get almost all of our beekeeping experiences from table events, where people come up and they're like, hey, I'm interested in bees. And you're like, guess what? You can come out to the farm. I'll put you in a bee suit. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, great, let's do it. So that's one way to really generate. And if you're already doing farmers markets, this is literally just like a wrap card or a pamphlet that you put on your table that you can hand somebody when they come through. The Michigan Economic Development Corporation. We have worked with the MEDC quite a lot, and actually have gotten quite a lot of business from working with them. Just having them promote our business, so like when Newberry, Michigan, the Facebook page, whenever we post something, they'll cross-promote. And so that's a great relationship to have with the MEDC. The MEDC is also a really great place for low-interest loans. Many of them provide community loans that are just for the community, and agriculture is a part of that. And so you can take advantage of some of the loans that they provide as well as other programs. They have some grant programs, but that's who you're going to be in contact for all the state of Michigan stuff that's happening with like community development. That's going to be through MEDC. Taste the Local Difference. Anybody heard of Taste the Local Difference? Yeah. So they put out a great food guide. They have an online food guide. We sign up for Taste the Local Difference every single year, and every single year we have people coming up to the farm saying, "Hey, I saw you at Taste the Local Difference," and great, that is actually working. So that's a great service. And it's both online and then they have the local food guide that's in print. The Michigan Agritourism Association. So they host a website that has a print directory called the Michigan Farm Fund Directory, which is the agritourism directory for Michigan. So if you want people to be coming to your farm for agritourism activities, that's the publication you want to be in. And it's a little publication. They'll send you a whole bunch of copies that you can put out at your farm, but it's a great way to promote your farm throughout the state of Michigan. And as people are coming here vacationing, they pick up these things at local stores and they see your farm in there and they're like, oh yeah, I need to go check that out. So another really great place to promote your activities.
Have you personally worked with the Michigan Agritourism?
Yeah. Yep, we advertise in their magazine every year.
Talk to one other farmer who has.
Different experiences?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who you're working with in a lot of these situations. Like, whoever your community liaison is, sometimes it's hit or miss. I don't know how many of you have worked with USDA in any capacity, but, you know, depending on how good your USDA office is, it can make a huge difference in what you're taking advantage of and what you're not. So, oftentimes, the person you're working with can have a big impact on your experience. Okay, so what are the risks of all this? Like, it sounds great to bring everybody out. Hey, I'm going to make more money. I'm going to be bringing people out. I'm going to be able to show them my passion. But the reality is that bringing people out onto your farm is an incredibly risky endeavor. Farms are dangerous places, plain and simple. I've been working in agriculture for 30 years, and I cannot tell you how many crazy accidents I've seen on farms. People getting crushed by tractors, people having limbs removed by processing equipment. Like, it is a dangerous place, and having people out there is dangerous. So what are some of the main things you need to be thinking about? Well, the big thing you need to be thinking about is your liability and the lawsuits that can come from anything that happens on your farm. A simple trip and fall can turn into you losing your entire agricultural enterprise if you're not properly structured and protected. And we'll talk about that here in just a moment. Yes?
Speaking of lawsuits, is there any insurance that gives the best rate for the agritourism business?
The best, well, rates, I can't say the best rates. The one that we found with the best coverage would be the Michigan Farm Bureau. And whatever your experience is with Michigan Farm Bureau, you know, all I can say is we shopped around, and it was the only insurance carrier that would cover us in the areas that we were doing, and would work with us specifically on what we work with, because we work with honeybees. So it's not just trip and fall, it's little Johnny running around and getting stung by a bee and going into anaphylaxis, and wow, now we've got a big problem on our hands, right? So you need to make sure when you're working with your insurance agent that you are clear with exactly what is happening on the farm. If you're bringing people into a processing house, you need to tell them that. If they're getting into bee suits and going out to the bee yard, they need to know that so that you are properly covered. Animal interactions, honeybees I mentioned, you know, that's one animal interaction, but another animal interaction is someone getting chased by a rooster that has never been around roosters before, and they freak out, right? So these are things that happen. So animal interactions are things you need to be thinking about. Processing accidents, like I mentioned, I was working on a processing facility on an apple orchard, and someone lost an arm because they weren't doing what they should be doing on a processing line. So these are things that really happen. U-pick situations. So U-pick is a great way to bring people out to the farm, but not everybody knows how to harvest crops. Some people have never operated a pair of pruners, and they're going through cutting apples off or trimming lavender, and they nick their finger or something like that. So U-pick operations can be risky. I worked on a cherry orchard growing up that was across the street from my house that I grew up as a child, and they gave people ladders to go climb up on in a U-pick operation. Falling from a 7-foot ladder can really cause some major injuries, right? So you need to be aware that all of these things have potential consequences. We do an asparagus U-pick. That's a little less risky because you're just walking around the ground snapping the crowns off, but I don't know, maybe somebody could trip and fall and hit their head. Allergic reactions. Honeybees, I mean, this is my main one. Most people have no idea if they are allergic to bees. Plain and simple. If they got stung as a kid, everybody who got stung as a kid says they're allergic to bees because they swell up. That's not the reality. Real allergic reaction to honeybees is anaphylaxis, and it can come on very fast. And so if you have somebody that gets stung on my farm, and maybe they're a child and nobody has ever been stung, and we had no idea how this child was going to react, what do you do in that situation? On a farm, oftentimes you're in a remote location, far away from medical attention. We don't even have cell service at our farm. I mean, we have to use our Wi-Fi in order to get cell service. So the likelihood that someone, you know, something happens to little Johnny and one of our employees is not around, they start going into anaphylaxis and the parent freaks out. What happens? We had a lady one time, and it wasn't even from our bees. Her son they bought like a trail mix from somewhere else. They came and stayed the night at our place. They got there and they were there for about an hour, and the next thing we know, this trailer is just hauling butt out of the farm, going the wrong direction towards the hospital. Never stopped and talked to us, just took the child and was trying to find the closest medical facility. So having safety plans in place for these types of things so that you know when customers come out, especially overnight customers, let them know, like, hey, we've got a safety plan. If something were to happen, just come and see us. In our case, we always have EpiPens on site, and so if it's a bee sting or it's like a peanut allergy or something like that, I will give you an EpiPen. I will not administer the EpiPen, but I will give you an EpiPen to administer to your child or to yourself. So making sure those things are in place. It's really important to have a safety plan in place when you're dealing with the public. And we'll talk a little bit about the details of a safety plan here in just a bit. So what are the legal considerations that you need to be thinking about as you're doing this? Because there's a lot of legal, you're putting yourself in a lot of legal jeopardy by having folks out. And it's just the reality of it. It's not an insurmountable challenge, but it is something you need to be very aware of. So number one is zoning. So not all areas are zoned for like agritourism activities. If you're in a residential area doing, a small urban farm, your zoning may not permit you to have large groups out to your farm and be blocking streets and things like that. Luckily, when we were in Lansing, we were on a dead-end street, so we could fill that entire dead-end street and nobody cared. But in other situations, that's not the case. Waivers are going to be your best friend. Every person that steps foot on our farm, outside of the retail store, if they're just coming to buy honey, that's one thing. But if they step foot on that farm to do anything else, camping, experiences, educational classes, they sign a waiver. And that's actually the top of our waiver right there. And that waiver says that being on our farm can lead up to death because you're on a farm. It's a dangerous place. We've got bees. We've got all sorts of things happening here. So you may actually get in serious trouble here, and you understand that, and you sign that waiver. Now, the one thing that I would really recommend is if you are dealing with this type of thing, it is worth the money to invest in an attorney that's going to draw up a waiver that is legally binding. There's all sorts of things on the internet, and you can download and print out anything you want, but whether it's legally binding in court or not is a totally different thing, and so it is worth the investment. To have a waiver built like this, we actually found it's the Greater Lakes Law Center. I believe they're out of Detroit. We actually worked with an attorney who was on a scholarship and did this for free for us.
Yeah.
So look around. There are legal services out there that can provide you with guidance that is not something you have to pay for. So that's something and they're great. Yeah, they're great. I mean, they worked with us through this. They talked to us about what the farm looked like, what people were going to be doing, and drew up a waiver for us that is a really good waiver. You also want to make sure you have the proper business structure. If you are a sole proprietor and that's how your business is structured, granted, the taxes are a lot easier to file that way, but your liability is through the roof. You can lose everything in a major incident when you are the only person and everything's being filed under your Social Security number. You're putting yourself at legal jeopardy. We structured as a limited liability corporation so that if something happens, yeah, we're going to lose some, but we're not going to lose the farm. Like, the farm is our personal property. And so that is protected. And most of our assets are protected. So it's a great way to protect yourself. Now, LLCs, you can do this yourself, or you can hire an attorney to do the paperwork, but it is a really great way to protect yourself. Did you have a question, sir?
Because with sole proprietorship, correct, they can come after not only your farm assets, but your personal assets, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So, and that's what you want to avoid, right?
So the LLC, they may take your farm assets.
They may take your farm assets, but it also depends on how you structure. So we rent our farm to our LLC. So the LLC doesn't own the farm. We own the farm.
Right.
So there's ways that you can also structure things so that your farm is protected. Like, I don't want to lose the farm. Like, if I lose a few assets, like, okay, but that 40-acre farm, that'd be devastating. So,
Excuse me,
yes,
can you make that statement again? You said you rent?
Yep.
Say,
we rent our farm to our business
and the farm is structured up under,
as an LLC.
When you say you rent the farm, you mean you rent the land?
Yeah. Yeah. We rent the land. $1 a month is what we pay. You just have to have, it just has to be structured.
Like, is there, I'm not sure I answered the question. So you rented to there, is there paper you had to sign for?
Yeah, there's a rental agreement. Yep. Just a one-page rental agreement. Yep, nothing fancy.
Yeah, our attorney, when he set up our LLC, created a rental agreement for us.
Beautiful.
We do the same thing.
That's a good attorney. That's a good attorney. Attorneys, we all have feelings about attorneys, right? I mean, we all have feelings about attorneys. There are some times where they actually are very useful, especially when you're trying to protect something. Signage is another thing. So your attorney is going to develop all these waivers, but you also having clear signage that's, like, we have signs all over our property that says hazard, bees in this area, you may be stung if you get beyond this point. Do not pass this point. But invariably, we have people, we have 2 bee yards on our property with over 100 beehives. Invariably, I will find someone standing in front of an electrical fence this far from a beehive and totally oblivious to all the signage, but the signage is there, and if something were to happen, we would just go say, look, there's signs posted everywhere. Like, you knew what the risk was. Hazards are clearly identified. Electrical fences are a big one. We had a toddler that was with his family out on our farm a few years ago, and he just took off. And kids just take off sometimes. And he was running, and he ran face first into a very hot electrical fence and bounced back about 3 feet. And he stood up, shook it off, and just kept going. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness he's here. Thankfully he didn't get knocked out or something like that. So these things happen. But all of your fences, especially if you have animals and you have electrified fences, those need to be clearly labeled that these are hot fences. Because people just get, they get kind of weird around things. They come up to the fence and they're like, put their hands on it. And yeah, it's going to hurt. Pesticide storage. Again, whether it's organic or conventional pesticides, clearly labeled areas where pesticide and fuels are stored is something you should be doing. And that's part of just best practice as a farmer. If you go through the Michigan Agriculture Environmental Assurance Program to be verified through them, that is going to be a huge part of your verification. Where your pesticides are stored, how close they are in proximity to your well, all of these things. Yes?
So if we've already gone through that and they did not suggest that we mark on the outside of our farm there are fuel stored there, should we mark that's...
Fuel storage is not something that they generally mark and meet. That's something you can do on your own. Okay. What I would generally recommend is if you have people that are getting close to where fuel storage is, get a fuel storage cabinet that locks.
Yeah, okay.
That's the easiest way to make sure that fuel is protected. Walking paths and tripping hazards, make sure that they're free of tripping hazards. If you want to create a walking path and you've got woods, we have 35 acres of woods on our property, so we have to clear paths. Make sure you're not leaving little nubbies for people to fall on. In the bee yard, it's the same thing. If you're working in an agricultural setting, maybe you're in a production field, the last thing you want are things on the ground that you're going to be carrying, a harvesting bin full of stuff and you hit a tripping hazard and you fall yourself. That's dangerous for you. But if you have somebody out that you pick and they're carrying a bushel of apples that they just picked and they hit something and trip, that can be a serious injury. And now you're liable for that because you didn't clear the land properly. So tripping hazards are a big part of that as well. Food regulations. So depending on how deep you're going into things, some people like to provide, food products. We don't do any food products on our farm, but we do have a food processing facility that we use for honey extraction. If you are going to be doing any kind of food processing with folks, make sure your food business is licensed by the state. Make sure that you are following all of the MDARD labeling standards because now you're providing food to people that you have produced, and so you need to make sure that all the labeling standards are up to snuff. This doesn't mean that you've got to go through some huge arduous process. Like for honey, as long as you're producing under $15,000 of gross sales in honey, your label basically says this was extracted in a facility that's not approved by MDARD. And that's your labeling restriction. So it's not a big deal, but you need to make sure that you're properly labeling things so that you're covered. You want to make sure that you're following good food safety standards like using gloves, using hand washing stations, things like that, proper signage as well, all things that are dictated by MDARD. Animals that are not in plant production areas, so all sorts of bacteria and things that can happen from animals walking in fields. This is how things like salmonella happen in lettuce production, primarily because of wild boars out in California that get into these fields and they're defecating and then it gets on lettuce and next thing you know it's in the consumer stream. So things like that. Serve Safe certificate, having a certificate that shows that you're using good food handling practices, not a bad thing. You might learn something as well. But having a facility that really meets the standard. So this is our facility right here. You see it's all stainless steel. Everything can be wiped down. It's a very clean facility that you can clean very easily and sanitize. Okay, so emergency preparedness. This is, I think, probably one of the most important things, especially if you live in a rural area. So we live in an area that's very far from everything, and so we have to have a safety plan in place in case something goes wrong. If someone gets hurt badly, the last thing you want to have to do is pull out your cell phone and start looking up phone numbers to call the right person. You want to have those things already in place so that you can just grab the book and say, okay, this is what we need. So having a safety plan is really important. Making sure that you have the numbers for fire, EMS, police, where the nearest hospital is. Those are things that you need to know. EpiPens. If you're dealing with anything allergen related, you need to have EpiPens on site. And your doctor will prescribe you EpiPens if you tell them, I'm a farmer, I have people coming out here, this is what I'm dealing with, I keep these, they will give you EpiPens. Cell service and landlines. So like I said, we have no cell service where we live. Zero. And nobody, no matter what carrier they have, has cell service because of where we're at. So we need to have a landline in case I need to call 911 and I'm not running around the field trying to get a signal so that I can call the proper people. If you're staffing employees, there needs to be some sort of an employee communication device. A two-way radio is the easiest way to do that. Wherever you are on the farm, you may be far away from where the action's happening, where someone's gotten hurt, but you need to be able to communicate with employees if they're identifying that there's a problem. And that's something that's, that's easy to do. A couple Motorola walkie-talkies will work just fine. A severe weather plan. Tornadoes, something comes around, you got people on your farm, where's the tornado shelter? Maybe it's bringing everybody down to my basement, but you need to at least identify what I'm going to do if something happens with people that are in an RV that are right across from me that could just potentially become airborne if something comes this way. So something like that. An evacuation plan as well. So we live in the middle of the Hiawatha National Forest. If we had a forest fire coming through us, there is only two ways out. You either go east or west. And so making sure that everybody knows what are the ways you need to be going to get to the closest safety, that's something you may want to identify as well. These are easy things to identify now. They are very difficult to identify when everybody's in a panic and trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. So think about these things, put these scenarios in your head and say like, yeah, if Johnny got stung with a bee and I need to get them to the hospital, this is the closest hospital. So something simple, but a thing you can put yourself, you can set yourself up for success for just by doing early. Biosecurity. You are farmers. There are all sorts of things trying to get onto your farm. Biosecurity is one of the most important things you can do as a farmer, is to develop a solid biosecurity plan. For me, as a beekeeper, off-site equipment is the biggest thing that we deal with. People want to bring their hive tool, they want to bring their smokers, they want to bring all these pieces of equipment. They could be carrying pathogens on them. Absolutely not. None of that steps foot on our farm. The other thing you may want to consider, foot traffic. Tennis shoes can be great areas for pathogens. If they've been walking around in production fields that are diseased, and now they come into yours, maybe because they like their muck boots and they only wear them when they're on farms, that can easily be transferred onto your land. And things like fusarium, you get that into your soil, that is not going away. That production is done at that area. And the tools that we did have to deal with fusarium decades ago, like methyl bromide, really nasty stuff, those things don't even exist in the market anymore. So you have to be concerned about your safety. This is your livelihood that you're dealing with. This is a fun experience for them. They're going to come and leave, but you are making a living off of this land. You need to protect it. Animal health is another one. So making sure that you're not allowing animals to interact with your production animals, like so-and-so's dog coming over and playing with your dogs, or something like that. These are things that you need to be concerned about. Having hand washing stations around is really big, especially if you have people touching your plants, like you-pick operations. Protective measures. So some of the things you can do if you are going to have people walking around in your production fields, maybe something as simple as shoe covers. Just those little footy things that they slip over their feet. That's a great way to protect your soil. Hand sanitizer. Tool sanitation. If you're providing you-pick operations and you're providing pruners or things like that, make sure that those things are getting sanitized in between every single use, because you have no idea what that person was doing with that when they're out in the field. They may be cutting your apple trees, they may be cutting your lavender, they may be cutting something totally different too. So just making sure that you are protecting your investment. And biosecurity, I think, is something that everybody should be thinking about all the time when it comes to farming, because something gets on your farm and you can't get rid of it, again, it's your livelihood. Pesticide safety. So probably the best thing when it comes to pesticide safety, again, organic or inorganic, the best thing I would recommend is to work with me, because they do have an entire protocol on pesticide safety, including providing things like signs, or spill kits, or first aid kits. So you want to make sure that you have these things in place. Material safety data sheets for all of the products that you use. Again, pesticides, otherwise, whatever products you're using that are hazardous, make sure you have those material safety data sheets in place. So that if someone gets exposed to something, you can pick up that binder and bring it to the hospital with you, and now the doctor knows exactly what they're dealing with because they have the material safety data sheets. Storage, make sure things that are hazardous are stored in locked areas and are clearly labeled. So like this pesticide sign sits outside of one of our barns, and that barn is locked. And so nobody can get in there, and they know that pesticides are there. This is also for your EMS and fire department. So if they come out to a fire on your farm, they need to know where hazardous materials are stored. So in case the fire reaches that area. Personal protective equipment, anytime you're using pesticides or any kind of hazardous material, you need to follow the label. The labels on these products are developed through registration processes through the EPA and are legally binding documents. Follow the directions, learn how to use proper PPE. And then applications, making sure that you're making applications, if they're spray applications or other pesticide applications, when they're appropriate. Meaning you're not spraying in the middle of the day when there's 20-mile-an-hour winds and that product is just flying right off of your crop. All right, public play areas, play equipment standards. If you're going to provide equipment for children to play on, make sure it is safe. Like, I mean, we can all build things, but I've seen people take culvert pipes and throw them over and make them into a slide, and they've got jagged edges where people have cut with a sawzall on them, and it's like, this is just a hazard waiting to happen. If you buy play equipment, make sure that it's maintained, make sure that things are not sharp pieces coming off of them and things like that. Make sure you're doing regular safety inspections. Make sure that the boundaries of the play areas are clearly marked. So if you don't want children in an area, you need to make sure that it's clearly marked, especially if you have a play area on the farm. You want to make sure that you're constantly clearing the area of safety hazards, making sure that you're not putting a play area next to your parking lot where there's cars driving all the time, or where you're bringing your tractors through constantly with implements on them. Those are things to keep in mind, and like I said, regular safety inspections on that equipment is really important. As far as employee management, you want to make sure that your employees are trained in whatever protocols you have to keep your customers safe. First aid training, CPR certificates. One of the things that we've been working on is a mental health first aid certificate, because we deal with a lot of veterans and a lot of us have mental health issues related to service. And so we want to make sure if someone's having a PTS episode that we have the tools to work with them through that situation. Again, personal protective equipment, making sure your employees know how to use the PPE and know when to use it. Knowing all the safety protocols, and again, two-way communication if you have employees, making sure there's always available communication between you and your employees on the farm. All right, so we're going to wrap it up here in the next couple of slides, but one thing I wanted to mention was risky crops. So, you are bringing people onto your farm. That also can make you a target. One of the main ones is hemp or commercial cannabis. So whether you're growing hemp, if you're growing it for fiber, it looks very different than CBD. But if you're growing for CBD, it looks exactly the same as traditional marijuana. And I had a friend of mine who we were doing a hemp business with, and sure enough, we had people out, and within a week, there was someone in this high tunnel ripping down plants. And it was CBD. I mean, you can smoke that plant all day long. Maybe they just wanted the CBD effects, but literally tearing plants out of the ground. So this particular crop can make you a very big target. So just consider that. If you're growing a few plants in your high tunnels and you don't want people to be exposed to that, make sure they don't see it. Or make sure it's somewhere where they can't get to. But it does put you at potential risk if someone sees that. And not everybody is as in tune as everybody else. They see that leaf and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make some money off of this plant. Mushrooms are another one. And I don't mean just psychedelic mushrooms. I mean mushrooms in general. You live in a mushroom foraging state. We have a friend that does wild foraging on their property. We do wild foraging on our property too. I would never let anybody know where my morel stash is. Because it's 40 acres, I can't control the back 40, and I don't want people knowing where these stashes are, right? I mean, if this is something you want for yourself, or you're selling, showing people this is where all my morels grow, you may not find those morels anymore at that location. So mushrooms are a big one. You pick crops too. Pretty much anything that's high value, you have the potential to lose by bringing people out and sharing it with them. Now, this is not everybody. This is a very small subset of the population I'm talking about. But in particular, this one is a very risky crop. Honeybees is another one. Honeybee theft is huge. Not so much in Michigan. In California, where I'm from, honeybees are stolen all the time. And so, again, something that's very valuable that someone sees and may want to take for their own. So let's wrap it up with the pros and cons here. So what are the pros and cons of agritourism and having people on your farm? Well, increased exposure. The farm's more visible to the public. You have people coming out all the time, and so there's just more visibility. Increased customer connection. It engages your clients and makes them feel like they're part of the farm. I mean, we have people that come out and do weeding days with us where they're weeding lavender fields. They are invested in that field at that point. They want to buy those lavender products because that's the field they've been working in. So they have buy-in. You have increased profits because you're direct to consumer instead of using a wholesaler at that point. We wholesale nothing anymore. We went from doing all wholesale because we didn't have a retail store. We do not wholesale anything anymore. Everything is retail, direct to consumer. And it literally, it about increased our profits by probably about 35 to 40%. Which, I don't know many other ways a farmer can leverage that much profit off of a crop without producing more, right? Increased revenue streams, you have camping, experiences, classes, you pick, so there's a lot of other revenue streams that you can incorporate into your business model. The big cons, increased risk, farms are dangerous places. Increased insurance costs. Yeah, you're going to pay more for a policy that covers you on this type of stuff. That's the reality of it. You may have to change your business structure. So you may have to go from a sole proprietor to an LLC to protect that investment. And you're probably going to need an attorney to ensure that your business assets are protected, that you are protected as a business owner. All right, so in summary, it's a great way to build your farm into a destination. It is a really fun way to interact with the public. It's way different than direct to market when you're doing farmers markets. You literally are inviting people out to your home, to where you produce. They see everything. So it's a really cool opportunity. Provides you with a diversity of new income streams that are non-traditional to farmers, right? Most of the time we produce agricultural products and we sell them. Now you've got a whole diversity of income streams that you can provide by having people out there. Engages your customer and provides them buy-in, but overall it increases risk. But that can be mitigated with proper planning and proper documentation. All right. I think we're like almost right on time, right?
Yeah.
Dang, that's it. All right, well, thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, I'm happy to, there we go, yeah. Let's answer some questions.
I'm very curious about your journey from scale up. So you started in Lansing and then you eventually ended up in the UP.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the flow of that and any tips or tricks or things you do differently or the best stuff you did, the worst things you did? Tell me about that journey.
I would say that it was the best decision we ever made to work with the land bank in Lansing and not buy a piece of land right in the beginning.
Okay.
So this is our 10th year of our farm. The first 4 years, we're all cutting our teeth on a land bank property that cost us about $160 a year.
Okay.
And that allowed us to reinvest everything we were bringing in into scaling the business side of things.
Yes.
So we were basically experimenting. I mean, we were producing things, we were selling things. I mean, we had bees, we had all these things on that little plot of land. And so it just allowed us to kind of explore business models that would work better for us.
Yes.
Like, where were we actually making money?
Yes.
Bearded irises. My mom was a collector of bearded irises. So we have like 30 varieties of bearded irises that we grow. When we first got into this, I was like, I am going to be a bearded iris producer. I am going to start making my own cultivars. We're going to do this. There is no money in that. And we found that out in about 3 years. And so we were able to shift because we didn't have ourselves leveraged so hard financially that we couldn't back away from it. And that's something I think a lot of people get so invested. I see it in the veteran community a lot. Like, we become farmers. We get a plot of land. Some people, the first thing they think of is, I need a tractor. No, you don't need a tractor. Because that tractor is like a $60,000 investment. Get it when you get to a point where you actually have the finances to support it. And so that, I think, was the smartest thing for us. Was we started slow. We didn't leverage ourselves hard. We were working full-time jobs when we first started our business, and slowly, we gradually both got to the point where, well, we both still have off-farm income. I'll be real honest, like off-farm income, in order to make a farm that's sustainable, you live in a reality nowadays where off-farm income is just something that we have to do, because there's some years where things are really rough. Like 2 years ago, off of 100 beehives, we harvested 600 pounds of honey. That's literally about $9,000. That's nothing for an entire season for us. And if I didn't have other income streams, and I was just leveraged into the honey business, that would have been a year we could have gone bankrupt. So making sure that you're setting yourself up smartly. When we decided that we were going to buy our big farm, that was a huge decision.
Yeah.
It was a huge decision, and it literally took us 4 years of cutting our teeth on that land bank property before we were ready to make that move. And we still kept farming on that land bank property for 2 more years while we were developing the farm up north.
Yes.
Oh, that was traffic from driving from Newberry to Lansing every weekend. It was terrible. But we did it because we needed to make sure that we made it happen. Now, when the pandemic hit, it was a whole nother thing. Like, we had just moved full-time in Newberry. Boom, pandemic hits. We had all these markets that we had been doing, mostly craft fairs, because I don't know, for those of you that do things that are outside of like vegetables, craft fairs are a gold mine. If you're producing any value-added products, oh my gosh. So we were doing all these craft fairs, and all of a sudden, every craft fair was closed. We had no outlet for anything. That's when we bought the retail store.
What's the craft fair?
Like, I mean, they sell like anything, like homemade goods, things like that.
Farmers market.
Kind of like a farmer's market, but I'd say like people are coming there not to buy vegetables, they're coming there to buy crafts, yeah. But so we found that that's been a great market. But when that happened, I mean, we've just leveraged everything into this business, and we were like, how are we going to even be able to make any income? Like, I can't even sell a bottle of honey to somebody. But that's when we bought the retail store. And I'll tell you what, that $6,000 investment into that prefab building paid for itself in about 4 months. Yes?
Can you speak to your retail space, particularly legal and regulatory issues you need to think about before having a farm store?
Before you're having a farm store, depending on what you're selling. So we do not sell perishable goods. So that's one thing. So if you're selling perishable goods, you're going to need to have like coolers, things like that. So depending on what you're doing, it's going to be a little bit different. But for us, basically because what we sell are value-added products, non-perishable goods, dried herbs, things like that, tea blends, things like that, there wasn't a lot of structure that we had to go through. I mean, basic business license through the state is really all we needed. Now, depending on your municipality, that may change completely. We live in the Upper Peninsula. Like, there's basically not even building codes up there. So it's a little bit different. And we moved there by design because we wanted the freedom to be able to do those types of things without a lot of, government oversight. But it's independent on municipality, largely, what you're going to have to do as far as the business is concerned for a retail space.
If you have a LLC for your farm, do you need additional business licensing for this?
No, that's licensed underneath that LLC, yeah. Yep.
Who did you go through for the prefab?
All around you see those little, like, people just have like a bunch of little buildings out that they're selling. Ours was built by the Amish.
Amish built it.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic building. Like, literally, it came on a flatbed. They put it exactly where we wanted it, and boom, it's an instant store.
Most of them will level it for you too.
Yeah. Fantastic. It's the best investment we made. I would never build a brick and mortar store at this point. Like, I mean, for a small farm, like if you've got a big farm where you got Uncle John's type thing, yeah, you need a big facility. But if you're a small farm, ours is a 10 by 20. It is plenty big for us to sell all of our goods in. A great investment. And they're in comparison to a brick and mortar building, they are very cost effective. Yes?
Speaking of bees, do you sell packages of nukes?
I sell nukes. We're the largest producer of nukes in the Upper Peninsula.
Where are you located? You said
Newberry.
Oh,
About an hour and 15 minutes northwest of the bridge.
okay.
Yeah.
Now, you don't sell anything closer
No, and I'll tell you, we sell out we sold out over 150 nukes this year in 5 days. Our bees are in very high demand. They never leave the Upper Peninsula. They overwinter every year. I'm an entomologist by training, so that's what my PhD's in. So bees are I eat, sleep, and breathe bees. I lost one beehive out of 100 this year.
Wow.
So that's kind of so we work with a breeder specifically for the lines that we work with. I've been doing beekeeping for 17 years, so we do a lot of bee business. But if you're interested in buying some UPVs, they overwinter are awesome.
Do they, you transport them? Can they transport
Nope. Well, you could if you bought bees from us, but our bees never leave our farm.
If I bought them for you, you will pack them, send them.
Yep.
You Amazon and UPS.
No, you would come and pick them up. We do not
That's
ship
what
our
I'm
bees.
talking
Yeah, we don't ship our
You don't
bees.
ship your bees.
Our bee health is our top priority. So I don't put my bees in stressful situations. They never leave our farm. We're not interested in pollination contracts or things like that. That is a side business that a lot of people do. I'm not interested in that. My priority is the health of my bees because we sell nukes, and that is one of the major income streams that we have is bee sales. Yes?
You just sell nukes, you don't sell packages?
Nope, and the reason I don't sell packages is because packages are imported into the state of Michigan. Most of them come from Georgia. They come here. Yes, sir.
Do you ever have set them up after you sell them?
Absolutely. We have workshops. If you are interested in beekeeping, we have workshops every month. We have a workshop up there. We call them open apiary hours. Anybody can show up and spend a couple hours with me in the bee yard. I'll teach you everything I know. There's no secrets here. I want everybody's bees to survive. We also have an online course. So we run the Heroes to Hives course through Michigan Food and Farming System, which is for military service members. But through Bee-Wise Farms, that business, we have an online course that's self-paced that you pay for the course. And basically, I send you an entire curriculum for the entire year that'll go through overwintering, spring buildup, mite management, all of the stuff that's pertinent to bees. All for Michigan. It's called Beekeeping Above the 45th Parallel, but it applies to Lower Michigan too.
Because I had bees for 5 years, but they never overwintered. They just kept dying.
Yep, so we can help with that. Come spend a weekend with us. I'll show you everything I know. And really, when it comes down to overwintering, the big things are mite management and going into the fall and all season long. But it's also the genetic line that you're working with. I'm an Italian, and I'll tell you what, Italian bees, they're for Mediterranean climates. They're not for Michigan. My first year in Michigan, I was like, holy crap, what did I get myself into? It was 2013, it was the 100-year storm that we had where Lansing had 4 feet of snow, and I was like, this is what we moved to? But now I live in the UP, so it's regular time.
So you have Italians?
No, absolutely not, because they don't overwinter well.
What do you have?
We use New World Carnolians.
Okay.
So New World Carnolians are a line of bee that have been developed over the last 30 years. A lady by the name of Sue Kobe is the individual who developed those, but they're developed specifically for northern climates. The Carnolians come from Slovenia, from the mountains of Slovenia, and they have very similar climate to us. And so they overwinter very well. And there's certain qualities you look for in those bees. I know I'm getting way off topic, but I'm a bee guy. I'm a bee guy, so I talk bees. But basically, the qualities you're looking for in these breeding programs, when you look for bees for northern climates, they need to shut down early, meaning that they don't keep brood on late into the season, and they need to build up late. Because right now, you all have been seeing this weather pattern we've been in all season. If you had Italian bees, they'd already have a bunch of brood on, and once the brood comes on, they do not release from the brood, and they will starve on that brood. And so when you do an autopsy, you see a ton of honey around them, and this little cluster of brood, and all these dead bees right on. It's because they built up too early. Italians do great in southern climates, because they build up rapidly. As soon as pollen is in the landscape, they build up. But other lines that are produced for northern climates, they'll see that pollen and they'll wait. And so many of you who have bees, you've been seeing pollen probably coming in for a month now. I was in my bees this week. There was not an ounce of pollen coming into those colonies because that's not their behavior. They build up late. And they wait for basically the break, usually around the beginning of April. And then they start to put brood on. Italians will put brood on in February.
I'm happy
Sorry,
to
Florence,
be,
yeah.
No. Hi, everyone. I'm the facilitator, so I'm sorry to be the party pooper. Let's keep the conversation going, but in case people want to take off, there's a workshop survey QR code in your registration. Please give feedback about this session if you're able.
Thank you very much.